Imagine discovering that the one person you trusted most, your own child, sold the last piece of your late husband's legacy. A priceless watch you wound every morning to feel his presence. It was not just betrayal. It was a dagger twisted into wounds that had barely healed. But what if that watch, that simple relic of love, held more than sentimental value? What if hidden inside was a secret code leading to millions of dollars, a buried truth your husband kept for decades, waiting for the day you would need it most? And what if your own son's greed had set in motion a battle that would pit mother against child, love against betrayal, and expose lies that could destroy everything? This is not just a story of family conflict. This is about survival, secrets, and shocking revelations. Stay with me and subscribe now to Silent Lies. The words hit me like a knife. Stop whining, it is already sold. My own son stood in my kitchen, arms crossed, his tone dripping with contempt as though I were a nuisance instead of his grieving mother. Mike's expression was indifferent, almost smug, as if betraying me meant nothing. He had just admitted to selling the only thing that tethered me to the man I had loved for 43 years. My late husband's Rolex gone. The shock made my hands tremble, water dripping from the dishes I had been washing. It felt like betrayal had a taste, bitter and metallic, flooding my mouth like copper pennies. "You sold your father's watch without asking me?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Mike rolled his eyes, leaning back like a teenager caught in some trivial lie. "Mom, get over it. It was just a watch. I needed money for the Italy trip. Ashley has been planning this for months." The audacity of his words left me stunned. Just a watch. That Rolex had not only been a luxury item, it had been part of Frank's very being. He wound it every morning, a ritual that had become part of the rhythm of our lives. After his sudden death, winding that watch each day became my way of keeping him close, of remembering his steady hands and the life we had built together. Mike did not just steal a possession. He tore away the last ritual I had to feel my husband's presence. Ashley's voice cut through the tension, sharp and condescending as she looked up from her phone. "Dorothy, honestly, you are clinging to the past. Frank would not want you obsessing over material things. You should consider therapy instead of mourning over an old watch." I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. She had been telling me what Frank would want since the day he was buried, as if my husband's memory were hers to interpret. Her tone dripped with false concern, as though I were the one unhinged. Mike shrugged, glancing at his shiny Apple Watch that probably cost more than what he got for Frank's Rolex. "Golden State Pawn on Milwaukee Avenue. They gave me $800. Not bad for something that old. $800. For a Rolex Submariner Frank had purchased in 1978 after working months of overtime, saving every extra penny while I carried our newborn son. That watch had survived decades, every milestone of our marriage, every family celebration, every heartbreak. It had been in the hospital bag when they handed me Frank's ring and belongings after his death, and now my own son dismissed it as something that old. I felt my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "That watch was worth at least $3,000, Mike, and it was not yours to sell." Ashley laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "3,000? In what universe? It was barely running. Because I was the one winding it, I wanted to shout. I was the one keeping it alive, keeping Frank alive, in the quiet moments when grief threatened to swallow me. But they would never understand. To them, everything had a price tag. Nothing carried memory. Nothing carried love. "I am going to get it back," I said firmly. "Good luck," Mike muttered, already heading for the door. "We fly out tomorrow. Ashley worked hard on this vacation." Ashley paused, her face painted with mock sympathy. "Dorothy, you cannot keep living in the past. You are hurting yourself." The door slammed, and with it the last illusion that my son cared about me shattered. I stood in the silence that had haunted my home since Frank's death, the bitterness of betrayal thick on my tongue. But they underestimated me. I was not some fragile widow clinging to old memories. I had spent 40 years as a bank manager. I knew about patience, about strategy, about when to fight back, and I was done giving up. Golden State Pawn looked exactly like I imagined, cramped, dusty, bathed in fluorescent lights that made everything look lifeless. The man behind the counter had tattoos up his arms and eyes that spoke of too many stories and too little faith in humanity. "You are here about the Rolex?" he asked before I could even speak. My chest tightened. "How did you know?" "Your son called ahead. Said you might come in. Said you were having trouble letting go. Look, I am sorry, But I paid fair market value. Fair market value. As if there were a price for 43 years of love, for the mornings Frank's watch ticked in rhythm with the sound of his coffee brewing, for the way his hand felt against mine when he wound it with that quiet smile. How could you put a market value on devotion? I will buy it back, I said desperately. Whatever you need. The man, his name tag reading Danny, shook his head with a look of discomfort. I cannot. It is already sold. Cash deal, no returns. That is how this business works. My heart sank. Somewhere in Chicago, a stranger was wearing the watch that had been the last piece of my husband I could touch. It felt like losing Frank all over again. But before despair could crush me, Danny leaned closer, his voice lower. Thing is, we found something strange while cleaning it up for sale. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small manila envelope. There was a hidden compartment in the back. Real professional job, like a jeweler did it. We found this inside. He handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper inside. Written in Frank's careful handwriting was a date. July 15, 1955. My birthday. Underneath it read, the day I knew I would marry her. My breath caught. Beneath those words was a sequence of numbers and letters. SS 4457, Chite 115 DS. My vision blurred with tears. Frank had hidden something inside the watch I had carried every day. Something he had kept secret for over 40 years. Danny was watching me cautiously. Do you know what it means? He asked. I shook my head, though something about the sequence tugged at my memory. It looked like more than random numbers. It felt like a code. The guy who bought it? I asked suddenly, fear prickling down my spine. What did he look like? Danny's eyes grew guarded. Why? Because my husband hid this for a reason. Whoever bought it, they might know. Danny hesitated. He did seem interested. When I mentioned something was inside, his whole demeanor changed. Asked if we had opened it. Paid cash, no name, no paperwork, but he came in specifically asking about Rolexes. Vintage Rolexes. It was not an accident. Someone had been looking for Frank's watch. Someone who knew about the secret compartment. And now it was in their hands. I walked back to my car, the piece of paper burning in my purse, its weight heavier than gold. I looked at Frank's neat handwriting, the date of our beginning, the code that seemed to carry the weight of secrets I had never imagined. My husband had trusted me with this only after his death. The truth was clear now. Losing the Rolex was not the end of my grief, it was only the beginning of a battle Frank had prepared me to fight. The paper with Frank's handwriting lay heavy in my lap as I sat in the car outside the pawn shop. My fingers traced the letters and numbers again and again, trying to force them into meaning. SS 4457 Chite 115 DS. They looked like account details, a password, or maybe coordinates, but nothing was clear. What chilled me most was the thought that Frank had hidden this inside his watch for decades, and he had never once breathed a word about it to me. After 43 years of marriage, I believed there were no more secrets between us. I had been wrong. When I returned home, the silence of the house felt unbearable. Frank's absence echoed through every room, but now it was joined by something else. A gnawing suspicion. My husband had carried a secret to his grave, and now it rested in my hands. The question was whether I was strong enough to face it. That night, I spread Frank's meticulous financial records across the dining room table. He had saved everything. Bank statements, tax returns, retirement plans. For years, I had thought his obsession with documentation was just habit, a quirk of his accounting background. Now, I realized it had been preparation. He had left a trail, but it was up to me to follow it. The code stared back at me, demanding attention. SS. Could it stand for Social Security? Frank's number began with 457, not 4,000, 457. CH Chicago, perhaps? EO 815 looked strangely familiar until my breath caught. August 15, the date of our wedding. DS. My initials. Dorothy Sullivan. My chest tightened as I understood Frank had built this code around me. Around us. He had wanted me to be able to unlock it. My heart pounded as I powered up my laptop. I searched for international banks, offshore investment firms, any institution that might use codes like the one in my hand. Hours passed as I clicked through page after page, my coffee growing cold beside me. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, my search led me to a discreet site for Secure Solutions Investment Management, based in the Cayman Islands. Their portal asked for a client number and password. With shaking fingers, I entered the sequence exactly as written. The page refreshed, and I nearly dropped the laptop. Valid account number. My pulse thundered in my ears. Frank had kept a hidden account, an entire life's worth of secrecy. The password field waited, blinking like a dare. I tried the obvious one-sore wedding date, our address, my birthday, but each attempt failed. Then I remembered Frank's note. Dorothy's birthday, July 15th, 1955. Not my actual birthday, but the night we met, the night Frank always said he knew. With trembling hands, I typed 71,555. The screen shifted, and the words appeared. Access granted. My breath caught as numbers filled the screen. Current account balance. 470, 296, 7 digits, nearly $3 million. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle the gasp that escaped. Frank, my husband who had always preached thrift and modest living, had hidden a fortune from me. For 43 years, while I clipped coupons, patched shirts, and worried about bills, he had been quietly amassing wealth in secret. At first, fury seared through me. I thought of the countless nights we argued over money, the times I had sacrificed, the vacations we never took, the simple comforts denied, all while Frank let me believe we were scraping by. But then my eyes fell on the account history. The first deposit, dated 1982, 3 years after Mike was born. $5,000. The note, initial inheritance investment. FS, inheritance. Inheritance. Frank had never told me. His father had died suddenly when Mike was just a toddler. I remembered the small amount Frank received then, enough to pay off our mortgage. But this was something else. He had taken much more and hidden it away. Each deposit was modest at first, hundreds at a time. Small amounts saved consistently, almost invisibly. Then, years later, the amounts surged. 10,000, 20,000 notations referencing property sales. My stomach dropped. Frank had been investing in real estate. The implications were staggering. While I believed our home was our only property, Frank had quietly bought and sold across Chicago, building something I had never known. And then, his final deposit, just 2 weeks before he died. $25,000 marked emergency liquidation. Why? Why was he suddenly cashing out properties in such haste? A sickening thought rooted itself in my mind. Frank had known something. His death from a sudden heart attack had seemed tragic but natural. But what if it was not? What if the catastrophe he had mentioned in his note was not random at all? My phone buzzed, dragging me from the spiral of questions. Mike's name lit the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mom," he said, his tone casual, almost bored. "Ashley's upset. She says you embarrassed us at the pawn shop." I nearly laughed. Embarrassed? They had stolen Frank's watch, and I was the one accused of making a scene. "I went to buy back your father's watch," I said evenly. "It was already gone. See? Problem solved. You should move on." His callousness made my blood boil. But when I mentioned that Frank had left something inside the watch, his tone changed instantly. What kind of something? His sudden interest was sharp, urgent. "A note," I said vaguely. "Some numbers. Probably nothing." "Maybe I should come over," Mike said quickly. "I can help you figure it out." Now I did laugh, the sound bitter. "Yesterday you told me to stop living in the past. Today you want to help?" "I am just trying to be supportive," he replied, but I heard the strain in his voice. "No, Mike," I said coldly. "You were trying to steal from me. First the watch. What next?" Silence stretched across the line, broken only by his irritated sigh. "Fine. Be stubborn. But do not come crying to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing ghosts." When he hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand. My son's sudden shift, his eagerness to see the note, it was more than suspicious. It was confirmation. Frank had hidden the watch for a reason, and Mike knew more than he was admitting. I turned back to Frank's papers with renewed determination. He had thought in systems, in logic, in codes. He had hidden this fortune not from me but from our son. The realization sliced through me with both pain and clarity. My son, my flesh and blood, was not just careless or greedy. He was dangerous. As the night stretched on, I traced connections across Frank's files, piecing together the life I had never seen. Real estate deals, investments, careful transfers all meticulously recorded. My husband had been living a second life as a strategist. quietly preparing for the day I might need protection. The weight of the code burned in my pocket, the account balance burned into my mind, and the words of my husband echoed. Emergency access only. Whatever danger Frank had anticipated, it was here, and it had my son's name written all over it. The glow of my laptop screen lit the darkened bedroom as I replayed Frank's video message over and over. His tired face filled the frame, his voice calm but heavy with secrets. Dorothy, if you are watching this, I am gone. He spoke with the deliberate clarity of a man who had rehearsed his words, a man who had known his time was short. He said the money was not his, that it came from his father, hidden decades ago. He had promised to protect it, to use it only if the family was in true danger. I paused the video, my heart racing. What danger? Frank had died suddenly of a heart attack at work, or at least that was the story. But now I could not shake the feeling that his death was tied to everything he had been preparing. He had been liquidating properties just before he collapsed. He had been hiding money from our son. The thought chilled me. What if Frank had known Mike was a threat? I pulled the envelope closer, staring at the neat handwriting on the paper. The code, the account, the balance of nearly $3 million, all of it had been hidden inside the Rolex for me to discover. He had left me the tools to fight a war I never realized I was in. But why had he believed I would need them? The next morning, I called in sick to the library. The idea of shelving books felt absurd when my husband's voice from beyond the grave was warning me of danger. Instead, I spread out the files again, looking for connections I might have missed. Frank's records showed property sales, investments, careful strategies that I never imagined he was capable of. He had always been the quiet, methodical man with his ledgers. But this was something else. This was strategy on a scale I had never seen. As I sifted through papers, one detail stood out. Sullivan Investments, LLC. The name appeared again and again, linked to property purchases Frank had liquidated. My stomach tightened. Sullivan was Mike's last name. I picked up the phone and called my nephew Danny, who worked in real estate. "Aunt Dot, it is good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I need to ask you something. Have you ever heard of Sullivan Investments, LLC? There was a pause, and I could almost hear him frown through the phone. "Actually, yes. They have been active lately, buying up properties around Chicago. Cash deals, moving fast." "Why?" My heart sank. "Can you find out who owns it?" "Give me an hour," he said. I spent that hour searching deeper into Frank's files. My fingers trembled when I found a folder mislabeled as insurance policies. Inside, instead of the expected paperwork, there were contracts, deeds, and finally a letter. It was dated 6 months before Frank's death, and signed by a private investigator named Thomas Chen. The words made my blood run cold. Frank had hired the investigator to look into Mike's finances. The report laid out debts, loans taken under false pretenses, and most damning of all, Mike's inquiries about inheritance laws, wills, and power of attorney procedures. He had been researching how to have me declared incompetent. My son had been preparing to strip me of control over my life, my assets, and everything Frank and I had built. By the time Danny called back, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Aunt Dot," he said, his tone grim. "Sullivan Investments is owned by Mike Sullivan. You're Mike." The confirmation felt like a punch to the gut. Frank had not been hiding money from me. He had been hiding it from our own son. Every move he made, every property sale, every coded message, it had all been to protect me from the boy I had raised. I sat at Frank's desk, staring at the investigator's report, when the sound of a key turning in the front door jolted me. Ashley's voice floated through the house, honeyed but sharp. "Dorothy, are you here?" Panic flared. I shoved the report back into the folder and minimized the account page on my laptop. By the time they walked into the bedroom, I was sitting stiffly at Frank's desk, my hands folded to hide the tremor. Mike carried a small suitcase, Ashley dressed in clothes that screamed money and vacations. Mike's eyes darted over the desk, scanning the papers. "What are you working on?" he asked casually. "Sorting through your father's things," I said evenly. "There is so much I never knew." Ashley's eyes flicked to the laptop screen. "Find anything interesting?" Her voice was light, but her gaze was sharp. I decided to test them. "Actually, yes. I found a reference to an investment account I did not know about. Nothing big, just a few thousand." The change in their expressions was instant. Mike's casual mask slipped, replaced by raw hunger. "An investment account? What kind?" "I am not sure. The paperwork is confusing. I might need an accountant to help sort it out." Ashley and Mike exchanged a glance, their unity terrifying in its silence. "We could help," Ashley said quickly. "Mike is good with finances." I forced a smile. "That is kind, but I already contacted Frank's old accounting firm. They will know how to handle it." Mike's jaw tightened. "Mom, those guys charge $300 an hour. I can do it for free." "I can afford it," I replied coldly. Ashley's mask cracked, her voice sharp. "What kind of numbers did you find?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "The kind that is none of your business." Her face flushed with anger. Mike stepped forward, his voice soft but edged with threat. "We are family. There is no need for secrets." "Secrets?" I said with a bitter laugh. "Like your gambling debts? Or the company you have been using to buy properties with money you do not have?" The color drained from his face. Ashley's mouth opened, but no words came out. "Your father knew," I said, standing. "He knew everything. He protected me from you even after death. That code you want so badly, it leads to more money than you can imagine, but it will never be yours." Ashley grabbed Mike's arm, hissing, "We need to leave." For a fleeting second, Mike's eyes softened, like the boy I once raised was buried somewhere inside him. But then Ashley pulled harder, and his expression hardened again. At the door, Ashley spat. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," I called after them. "It ended when you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive." The door slammed, leaving me trembling but resolute. Frank had been right. The real danger was not out there. It was inside my family, and now I knew the truth. I was ready to fight back. 2 days after Mike and Ashley stormed out of my house, the doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a tailored suit with a briefcase and a young man beside her, his polished appearance screaming law school. I opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Sullivan? I am Catherine Wells from Wells Morrison and Associates. This is my colleague David Kim. We represent your son in certain family legal matters." Legal matters. My stomach tightened. I did not invite them inside. "What can I do for you?" Catherine's smile was warm, practiced, and false. "Your son is deeply concerned about your well-being. He believes you might benefit from a little support in managing your finances, especially now." David stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We understand you may have come across some accounts your husband kept private. Complex investments can be overwhelming, especially during grief. Your son simply wishes to help." The words were honey over poison. I kept my tone calm. "I have managed finances for 40 years. I am capable." "Of course," Catherine said smoothly. "But consider this. Temporarily, you could grant Michael power of attorney, just until you feel more settled." The world seemed to tilt. Power of attorney. Exactly what Frank's investigator had warned me about. I steadied myself against the doorframe. "And who decides when that temporary period is over?" "At your discretion," David replied quickly, though his glance toward Catherine betrayed uncertainty. I let silence stretch, then stepped back. "We are done here." But Catherine's expression shifted, her smile tightening. "Mrs. Sullivan, your son is prepared to file a petition regarding your competency, accessing offshore accounts, conducting transactions without professional guidance. These could raise concerns. It may appear you are not thinking clearly." There it was, the threat unveiled: sign voluntarily or be declared incompetent. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "You know what is interesting about threats? They only work if I do not have better lawyers than you." Her composure faltered for just a heartbeat. I closed the door in their faces and locked it firmly. My hands shook, but not with fear. With fury, I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had found in Frank's hidden files. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Thomas Chen," a calm voice answered. "Mr. Chen, this is Dorothy Sullivan, Frank's widow." "I have been expecting your call," he said. My breath caught. "Frank told me you might need my services someday." Within hours, I was seated across from him in a sleek downtown office, papers spread across a mahogany desk. Thomas was efficient, direct, and terrifyingly thorough. "Your husband was careful. He anticipated everything. 6 months ago, he asked me to prepare a legal defense package in case anyone challenged your competency or your right to his assets. It is all here." He opened folders filled with damning evidence. Bank records showing Mike's gambling losses, loan documents riddled with fraud, audio recordings. "Audio recordings?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Thomas nodded. "Frank suspected Mike was planning something, so he wired your house. Every conversation Mike and Ashley had in your kitchen, in your living room, it was recorded. I sat frozen, recalling months of casual cruelty, Ashley's whispers about my supposed memory problems and their jokes about nursing homes. Frank had heard it all. He had been listening even as his heart weakened. And there is more, Thomas said grimly. Frank discovered Ashley was isolating you. She spread rumors, told neighbors you were confused, told friends you did not want to see them. She built a narrative that you were losing your mind. The pieces fell together with brutal clarity. The awkward silences from friends, the pitying looks from neighbors, the sudden absence of family calls. Ashley had been orchestrating it, laying the groundwork for Mike's legal play. How much evidence do you have? I asked. Enough to destroy their case and likely charge them with elder abuse and attempted fraud, Thomas said, sliding a thick folder toward me. But Frank left something else. He handed me a sealed envelope. Frank's handwriting on the front nearly undid me. Inside was a letter dated a week before his death. My dearest Dorothy, if you are reading this, Mike has shown his true colors. The money is not just an inheritance. It is justice. Every penny came from investments I made using opportunities Mike bragged about. He thought he was clever. I listened, I followed, and I built something he could never touch. The account is yours now. Use his greed against him. The choice is yours, my love. Forgive him or let him face the consequences. Forever yours, Frank. Tears blurred the words. Frank had not only protected me, he had turned Mike's arrogance into a trap. Every scheme Mike had boasted about had been his own undoing. Thomas's steady gaze met mine. Are you ready to proceed? I thought about Mike as a child, wide-eyed on his first day of school, clutching Frank's hand. Then I thought about the man who stood in my kitchen calling me a crazy old woman ready to strip me of my life. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Yes, I said firmly. File everything. Today. The following morning, chaos descended on my quiet neighborhood. I sipped coffee by the window as 3 black SUVs pulled up to Mike and Ashley's house. Agents in FBI jackets poured out, carrying boxes, seizing computers, pulling cabinets onto the lawn. My phone rang, Mike's name flashing. Mom, he gasped, his voice frantic. What did you do? I protected myself, I said calmly, watching the agents. What you should have done for your family instead of trying to rob it. You do not understand, he pleaded. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I replied coldly. Ashley's voice cut in, shrill with rage. You vindictive old witch! We were trying to help you. Help me? My voice hardened. By stealing my husband's watch? By planning to declare me incompetent? By spreading lies about my sanity? The line went quiet except for Ashley's ragged breathing. Frank knew everything, I continued. Every debt, every lie, every plan. He spent his last year making sure you could never win. He protected me, even after death. There was a broken sound on the other end, Mike's sob, raw and pained. He really knew? He knew, I said, my voice like steel. And now the world will too. The day after the FBI raid, I sat in Thomas Chen's office. The weight of Frank's foresight spread out in front of me in neatly stacked files. Everything my husband had hidden, every recording, every document was there. Frank had spent the last years of his life weaving a net of protection so tight that Mike and Ashley could not slip through it. Thomas leaned back, steepling his fingers. Your husband was a master strategist. Most men prepare wills, maybe some trusts. Frank built a fortress. He turned Mike's greed into a weapon against him. I wanted to laugh, but the sound that came out was half sob, half disbelief. He was supposed to be a simple accountant, I whispered. I thought he lived for ledgers and balance sheets. I never knew. You knew him, Thomas said gently. You just did not know the war he was fighting. Before I could respond, his secretary entered. Sullivan, there is someone here to see you. He says his name is Richard Torres. A man in his 60s entered, tall, neatly dressed, carrying a small velvet box I recognized immediately. My breath caught. I am the one who purchased your husband's watch from the pawn shop, Richard said. But it was not by chance. Frank hired me 20 years ago. He asked me to watch for this day. Confusion and hope tangled inside me. Watch for what? He set the box on Thomas's desk and opened it, revealing Frank's Rolex. The sight of it nearly undid me. But Richard was not finished. He turned the watch over and pressed a hidden catch. A panel slid open, smaller than the first. Inside was a micro SD card. Your husband anticipated everything, Richard said. He recorded Mike. Every conversation about declaring you incompetent. Every plan to seize your assets. He gathered 18 months of evidence, audio, video, financial records. Enough to crush any challenge. Thomas inserted the card into his computer. The screen filled with folders, dates, recordings, transcripts, photographs. My heart pounded as I saw my kitchen, my living room, the places where Mike and Ashley had sat and plotted. Frank had captured it all. Richard's voice softened. Your husband asked me to give you this if the day ever came. He wanted you to have not just the money but the power to protect yourself. Thomas handed me another sealed envelope. Inside was a document titled Dorothy's Protection Plan. My hands trembled as I read. In the event that Michael Sullivan attempts legal action against Dorothy Sullivan's mental competency, the following assets will be transferred immediately to the Chicago Children's Hospital in Michael Sullivan's name. All property owned by Sullivan Investments, LLC. All gambling debts and outstanding loans. All legal fees and court costs associated with elder abuse charges. Frank had orchestrated a trap so elegant it stole my breath. Mike would not only fail to take what was mine, he would inherit his own ruin. Every attempt to harm me would strip him of what he already had. Thomas exhaled, almost reverent. Your husband was brilliant. He used Mike's obsession with control to ensure he would lose it all. I touched the watch, the weight of it grounding me. For decades, I thought it was simply a reminder of love. In truth, it was a vault, a weapon, and a legacy all in one. Later that week, I watched from my kitchen window as more agents carried boxes from Mike's home. My phone rang again. Mike's voice was broken, desperate. Mom, please, what did you do? I did nothing more than protect myself, I said evenly. Something you should have done for your family. You do not understand, he cried. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I replied coldly. Frank gave you every chance and you chose greed. Ashley's voice screeched in the background. You old witch! We were trying to help you. Help? I spat. By selling Frank's watch? By plotting to have me declared incompetent? By whispering lies to my neighbors, telling them I was losing my mind? That is not help. That is cruelty. The line went silent except for their ragged breathing. Frank knew everything, I said finally. He spent the last 2 years making sure you could never succeed. He protected me even in death. And now, the world will know what you are. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Mike's voice, low, broken. He really knew? He knew, I said. And he made sure you could never hurt me again. The call ended, leaving me standing in my kitchen, Frank's watch warm against my wrist. For the first time since his death, I did not feel alone. I felt armored by his love, his foresight, his unshakable determination to protect me from the son we both once cherished. That night, I opened the files Richard and Thomas had given me. I listened to Mike's voice on recording after recording, dismissing me, mocking me, plotting to strip me of my dignity. I watched Ashley whisper lies, spinning stories to anyone who would listen, isolating me from the world. It was like reliving every wound, but this time I was not powerless. I had proof. I had weapons. Frank's voice in the recordings was absent, but his presence was everywhere. His fingerprints on the trap, his love in every detail. He had not left me defenseless. He had left me with the means to win. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle. The war was no longer about survival. It was about justice. 3 weeks later, the storm that had consumed my life finally began to settle. Mike and Ashley were under federal investigation, their assets frozen, their names whispered with disgust across Chicago. For years I had felt powerless, a widow surrounded by silence. Now, I realized I was holding the final word, not them. Thomas Chen's office had become my second home. That morning, he handed me a fresh stack of papers. The prosecutors are recommending 2 years in federal prison for Mike. Ashley accepted a plea deal, 18 months. The evidence your husband gathered was overwhelming. I nodded, numb. The justice system was moving, but my heart was still heavy. These were my son and daughter-in-law. My flesh, my family, now exposed as predators. Then Thomas's secretary entered. Mrs. Sullivan, there is a visitor. He says his name is Richard Torres. Richard stepped in, his presence calm, steady. He held the velvet box once more, but this time there was no mystery in his expression. Mrs. Sullivan, your husband planned further than you could imagine. There is something else you must see. He pressed the back of the Rolex, and another compartment opened. Smaller, subtler. Inside was a micro SD card. My breath caught. Another one? Richard nodded. Frank recorded everything. Every meeting, every conversation, he built a case no one can refute. Thomas slid the card into his computer. The screen filled with folders upon folders, audio, video, photographs. I watched in silence as my own kitchen appeared again. My son's voice sharp with contempt. Ashley's whispers venomous. Plans to declare me incompetent, jokes about nursing homes, discussions about seizing everything I had. The room spun. He knew, I whispered. Richard placed a steady hand on the desk. Your husband loved you enough to spend the last years of his life turning their betrayal into their downfall. He wanted to make sure you would never be cornered, never silenced. Thomas clicked through the files, his expression grim. This is irrefutable. With this, they cannot escape conviction. Richard then handed me one last envelope. Frank's handwriting scrawled across it. Inside was a single page. Final instructions. Dorothy's protection plan. I read slowly, every word burning. In the event that Michael Sullivan attempts legal action against Dorothy Sullivan's mental competency, all assets tied to Sullivan Investments LLC will be transferred to the Chicago Children's Hospital under his name. Every debt, every loan, every fee associated with elder abuse will become his responsibility. Frank had orchestrated it perfectly. Mike's greed had become a weapon pointed back at him. He would not just fail to take my inheritance, he would pay for his attempt with his own future. Tears blurred my vision. He turned Mike's own schemes against him. Thomas nodded. Your husband created a legal masterpiece. He knew Mike would not stop, so he made sure that trying would destroy him. I touched the Rolex, feeling its weight. For so long I had thought it was just a watch, a relic of memory. Now I understood it had been Frank's shield, his last embrace around me. Weeks passed. I signed documents, authorized transfers, and finalized protections. One morning, I stood in the lobby of the Chicago Children's Hospital, watching workers install a gleaming brass plaque, the Frank Sullivan Memorial Wing. Funded by Dorothy Sullivan, Frank's hidden fortune had not only secured my safety, but created a legacy of healing for children who would never know his name. The irony was sharp. Mike's attempt to steal from me had built the largest donation in the hospital's history. As I watched, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. Mike's sentencing is next week. Do you want to attend? I stared at the words for a long moment, then typed back, No, I have better things to do. That evening, I cooked dinner in my new home near Lake Michigan. The house was small, peaceful, filled with light. I had joined book clubs, volunteered at the hospital, surrounded myself with people who saw me as more than an aging widow. For the first time in decades, I was living on my own terms. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with familiar eyes. Nervous, hopeful. Grandma Dorothy, it is Melissa, she said softly when I opened the door. My granddaughter, Mike's daughter. I had not seen her since Frank's funeral. I know I should have called, she said, twisting her hands. I heard about Dad and Ashley, about everything they did. I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, I told her. Tears welled in her eyes. I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking about Grandpa's finances. Ashley kept saying you were losing your memory. I should have said something. I pulled her into an embrace. You are here now. That is enough. Over dinner, Melissa told me about her new teaching job, her fiancé, her plans for the future. She was bright, earnest, everything Ashley was not. I keep wondering if I should visit him in prison, she admitted, her voice breaking. But I am so angry. Anger is natural, I said. But Mike is still your father. How can you not hate him? She asked. I thought of Frank's letter, of the choice he had left me. Forgiveness or justice? I smiled sadly. Because hate would mean he still controls me. I choose peace. Melissa's tears spilled over. I missed you so much. Ashley told us you did not want to see us anymore. I never stopped wanting to see you, I whispered. When she left, promising to return every week, I stood on the porch and watched the sun sink over the lake. Frank's watch ticked steadily on my wrist. He had been gone for 8 months, but he was still here. The greatest love stories are not written in romance or passion. They are written in protection, in the sacrifices made quietly, in the battles fought in shadows. Frank had spent 2 years preparing for a war I never knew existed. He had ensured that even in death, I would never be defenseless. Some people spend their lives searching for love that lasts. I had worn it on my wrist for 43 years. When I look back now, I realize that what Frank gave me was not just love, not just companionship through 43 years of marriage, but a shield forged from foresight and sacrifice. He understood something I did not want to believe, that danger can come from those closest to us, that betrayal sometimes wears the face of family. My own son, the child I raised with every ounce of devotion, chose greed over loyalty, cruelty over compassion. That truth nearly broke me, but Frank never let me face it alone. Even in death, he was standing between me and destruction. Every hidden account, every coded message, every folder of evidence, those were not secrets meant to divide us. They were gifts, carefully placed in my path to ensure I would survive what was coming. His love was not measured in flowers or whispered promises. It was measured in protection, in strategy, in making sure I would never be powerless. The Rolex he wore every day was more than a timepiece. It was a vessel of memory and a vault of defense. Inside it, he placed both his devotion and his warning. Inside it, he left me proof that love is not just about holding hands in the light, but about guarding each other in the dark. And though the revelations tore my family apart, though I watched my son face the consequences of his own greed, I also discovered something else: resilience. I found strength I did not know I had. I rebuilt my life, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman who chose peace over bitterness, justice over silence. I walk now through quieter days. I volunteer at the hospital wing that bears Frank's name, where children's laughter echoes through halls funded by the very fortune my son tried to steal. I sit with my granddaughter, rebuilding bonds Ashley tried to destroy. I drink coffee by the lake, wearing the watch that still keeps perfect time, a constant reminder that Frank is with me in every tick of the second hand. And I tell this story not because it is easy, but because it matters. Because somewhere out there, someone listening knows what it feels like to be betrayed, to be underestimated, to be told their grief is inconvenient. To you I say, you are stronger than you know. Sometimes love leaves behind more than memories, sometimes it leaves behind armor. So do not look away, do not dismiss the warnings, and never let anyone convince you that your story is meaningless. If this story held you, if it made your heart race, if it reminded you of the power of truth and the endurance of love, then stay with me. There are more secrets to uncover, more betrayals to expose, more silent lies to break open. Subscribe now to Silent Lies, because the next story might be the one you cannot afford to miss.